Alright guys, so it's actually been 2 Gen 2s away from my last Gen 3 tier list, and I'm going to be ranking every Gen 3 from worst to best, so you guys know what to either buy or grind. Now, I'm not going to be including the KGs and the weapons into this tier list, but I will be explaining what the KGs do and how good they actually are, just in case you guys want to actually go and grind these tail beasts. By the way, guys, when I hit 300,000 subscribers, I am going to be doing the 1 chip challenge. So I will be doing the 1 chip challenge at 300k subs. I just wanted to, let you guys know that I did the, the super spicy pepper challenge at 200k. At 300k, we're going to be getting a little bit hotter with the 1 chip challenge. So make sure to like button, subscribe, guys. All right, guys. So coming in 7th place is going to be the APOL spirit. Now, of course, being the first Gen 3 in the game, APOL doesn't have some of the other things the other ones have. Now, this actually drops one of the best EKGs in the game at the moment, a Pulse Sand, which does have a ranged instant guard breaking move and also has a really good hyper armor move that reduces the amount of damage you take, which is actually the 3rd move. Now, despite the EKG being really good, the actual tiered spirit, which is what this tier list is about, honestly is not that great overall. I mean, like when it comes to the Appel spirit, you can definitely tell that it's the oldest one because it doesn't have some of the features the new ones have. And frankly, the summon, it really isn't that great at the end of it, and the actual damage of Appel spirit doesn't really compare to the other ones as well because the Z spec isn't extendable and things like that. So it definitely has fallen behind when it comes to, what the new ones have, but it's still a Gen 3 and it's still okay and pretty decent overall. Now coming to 6th place is going to be, unfortunately, Sparky Spirit, which actually was one of my favorites for a very long time until I found out the Z-Spec has no iframes whatsoever. So if you hit someone with the Z-Spec and they immediately use an iframe, you're going to get absolutely destroyed. It's unfortunately how it is when it comes to Sparky Spirit. The Q-Spec is pretty good for Sparky. I mean, like, it summons a bunch of traps on the ground and stuff like that, like what the summon actually does. The throwable is the exact same with all of them. It is a counter, but the actual EKG of Sparky as well also has received a major nerf. It's not nearly as good as what it used to be, but the actual Sparky Spirit itself, honestly, if the Z-Spec had iframes, it would be easily the best Gen 3 in the game, but the fact it doesn't have iframes definitely, makes it a lot lower. The actual Q-Spec move of it that allows you to extend, not just the summon, is probably one of the better Q-Specs right now, because it is move stackable, but that's kind of all that Sparky has going for it at the moment, and unfortunately, even though Sparky Spirit is definitely one of the coolest ones and one of the most unique ones, it doesn't really compare to a lot of the other ones at the moment. I'm not really sure whether or not it should get buffed or nerfed, though, because it does, all of them have a decent raised block besides Maru, and frankly, Sparky Spirit's okay as it is. It's just not as good as the other Gen 3s. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, I'm going to be doing this entire tier list based off of their final mode only. I'm not going to be including 1, 2, or 3rd mode rank, but I might, I might mention it if it actually is a pretty good, placement for it. Like, some of them have insanely good 3rd modes instead of 4th modes, and I will be mentioning that as well. Like, Sparky Spirit has a really good 3rd mode. Honestly, in a lot of different cases, the 3rd mode or 2nd mode will be better than the final mode for Sparky. Now, coming to 5th place is going to be the Maru Spirit. Honestly, one of my favorite Gen 3s just based off of visuals alone. It has one of the coolest, final mode, visuals out of all of them. Now, unfortunately, Maru, much like a Paul, has shown its age over time. I definitely think since the Z-Spec isn't counterable and since it has, a better Q-Spec overall, because the Maru that you summon does a huge damage beam to people, it is actually better than a Paul, and since the Z-Spec isn't counterable, it is better than Sparky. Now, when it comes to Maru, the 4th mode is honestly really the only good one. The 2nd and 3rd mode of Maru really doesn't compare to the final mode. I definitely think the summon doing huge damage bursts can be quite a good thing, but when it comes to that, I do feel like it's a little bit worse than Mustang when it comes to actual damage burst, because Mustang Spirit does a huge damage burst as well, and you get other things attached to it. So unfortunately, Maru is going to be hitting 5th place on this list, and as the new Gen 3s come out, I honestly think it's just going to be getting lower and lower. Like 8th Tail Spirit is probably going to be top 3, 9 Tails is probably going to be literally 1st place. They're probably going to make that super broken. So unfortunately, these ones specifically, so Maru and below, is probably just going to keep going down in the rank. But yeah, Maru is okay overall. I wouldn't say it's really that great. It's kind of just like a very basic one. It's starting to show its age as well when compared to other Gen 3s, because it has been like 8 months since the first Gen 3, so it is starting to show its age. Now coming to 4th place is going to be the Milkman himself, Alfie Spirit. So the Milk Slug is honestly pretty good. I mean, like, it's just a really good spirit in general. I definitely feel like Snail Sage is kind of just a better version of Alfie Spirit, if I'm going to be honest, but Alfie Spirit definitely has a lot going for it. It's pretty good overall. The Z-Spec is decently extendable. The actual EKG for Alfie Spirit is insanely good. I forgot to talk about Pyromania for Maru, by the way. Pyromania, the element, the 6th move is really good, so there's that. But for Alfie Spirit, the Fizz ability, the Fizz travel move is honestly pretty good overall. You can use it to bypass block if you go behind him and hit him and stuff like that. Pretty good EKG. Now for the mode itself, it's just like, I feel like the actual Alpha Spirit, you know, summon really isn't that great overall. Of course, it summons bubbles everywhere and stuff like that, but in the actual fighting scenario, that's really not going to be as useful as getting guaranteed stuns and stuff like that. Also, you know, I do feel like, you know, the damage is a little bit lackluster on this actual ability itself. The Z-Spec is, you know, it can be extendable based on what you do with it, and obviously does have the counter throwable. Now, the third and second mode of Alpha don't really compare to the final mode either, so those aren't going to be in contention. Now, coming to third place in the top 3 Gen 3 spirits is going to be the Mustang Spirit. Now, Mustang Spirit, I kind of gave this some flack when it first released because I do feel like what made it good was extremely hard to notice at the time, because Mustang was just one of those kind of like low-key good things in the game. You know, the Z-Spec was one of the first extendable Z-Specs along with Happy. I mean, like, the Q-Spec of Mustang is pretty good overall as well. The summon can make giant AoEs around you that can actually stun them. Also has a chance to do huge damage bursts to people. Now, unfortunately, the Q-Spec doesn't have any iframes whatsoever, so that's something you have to take into account. The fact it has no iframes means it is kind of a little bit worse than team fights in general if you're actually going to be using the Q-Spec. Most people just use the Q-Spec if they're in team fights and just run away with it. Like, they launch themselves away and just use the summon. Now, of course, like I said, the Z-Spec is extendable. It can be a little bit hard to hit because the actual range on the extendable part of it isn't really that great, so you have to have a little bit of aim, and then obviously the throwable is actually a counter. Now, this is one of the ones where the third mode is potentially better than the fourth mode. It pretty much has like instant stun abilities, you know, pretty decent damage bursts and stuff like that. I still recommend that for all of these you stick to the final mode because, you know, Mustang has insanely high raised block, Alpha Spirit has insanely high raised block. You know, you kind of need that raised block in, you know, PvP with other Gen 3s because you're not going to be hitting them without those huge M1s. But yeah, Mustang Spirit, very, very solid overall. It would be an S tier Gen 3 for sure. At the start, like I said, I did underrate it a bit, but you know, that's just kind of what comes along with ranking things. Over time, your opinion changes, and I'm sure most of you understand that. The company's second place in the Gen 3 tier list is going to be, of course, Happy Spirit. Now, not, of course, depending on whether or not you think of what you think of Happy Spirit, but I mean, like, this is just kind of one of those known things. Happy Spirit overall is an extremely good tailed beast. It has a really easily extendable Z-Spec. Not as easy as Cho-Cho, as I'll get on when I actually get the Cho-Cho, but it does have an extendable Z-Spec, which actually can be quite good. You can slap some cheeks together with Happy. The actual Q-Spec of it, the summon does do giant AoE attacks. So, like, it makes a magma attack that lasts like 5 to 6 seconds of stun time. Extremely good, as you guys might imagine, for both 1v1s and team fights, because getting free stuns of people is pretty good. And then the actual Q-Spec of it also does a lot of damage. At the end of the actual Q-Spec, it does do a even further stun, which does allow you to move stack even more. And then the throwable is actually a counter like all the other ones. Now, Happy is also one of the better looking ones. You know, don't get me wrong. I forgot to talk about Fume for Mustang. I'm just going to throw this in here real quick. Fume has been absolutely nerfed out the wazoo. Do not use Fume. It is literally F tier right now after the nerf. But Happy, Magma, I do feel like Magma is a little bit underrated as an EKG. It has a pretty good stun, pretty good block break, pretty good, you know, extender. It's just an okay EKG overall. Now, the weapons for all of these, by the way, are really not that great besides the Maru daggers, which is pretty good in general for PvP. But yeah, Happy Spirit, solid second place on this list. Really extendable, you know, Z-Spec, pretty good Q-Spec, and the summon is by far one of the best summons in the game. By the way, guys, what is your favorite Gen 3 in Shindo Life? From the comments below, we'll be checking them out. All right, guys, so there is only one tailed beast left, and it is going to be the Cho-Cho Spirit coming in first place. Now, I'm only going to be going over the third and final mode just because those are the modes that actually matter. I never did a showcase over this, so this will be a mini showcase. The Z-Spec is the exact same as all the other Z-Specs. It's the basic just beam ability when it comes to stage 3. The actual Q-Spec of the move is actually pretty good. It's a massive AoE, and then you actually do get the buffed M1s that do knock back. And then the actual throwable of it is pretty much just the powder ability. I mean, like, there's really not much to say about it. It's just the powder ability, but it goes into an air combo afterwards instead of just being a normal powder ability. But when it comes to third stage, it's honestly pretty good, but it isn't what makes Cho-Cho so good. Let's get into what makes Cho-Cho good here. So first of all of the Gen 3s have really good stats when it comes to this, and the mode drain is only 40. It's really not that much, all things considered. Now, the Z-Spec of Cho-Cho is the first reason why it's actually going to be ranking so high. The Z-Spec just is an insanely long hit stun ability. Now, if they try to move around inside of it, they will actually take extra damage based on how much they move inside of the ability. So it's just a really long hit stun ability that, you know, the more they move around, the more it hurts them pretty much. Honestly, just a really, really good, you know, Z-Spec. Probably the best Z-Spec out of all of them because it is extremely easy to use and extremely easy to hit. Now, the actual Q-Spec of Cho-Cho is going to be a dash attack, which does a bunch of sword slams, and the actual Cho-Cho Spirit is honestly really, really, really good. Now, the actual Q-Spec doesn't stun for that long, but the Cho-Cho Spirit AoE size from the summon is honestly massive. Also, the Spirit lasts forever, so it actually will go through a full revolution of its abilities, which will will be a Z-spec that does a bit of damage, and sometimes at the end of it, it will do Powder's first move. But honestly, like, first, all right, so let me show you the raised block real quick. Yeah, look, I could literally jump up onto this vine. Look, I'm literally on this vine from the ground, just like not even jumping. Look at this, boom, and then I jump. I'm on the vine. Like, the raised block of Chocho is ridiculous. It has the best Z-spec out of all of them. It has the best raised block. It is extremely hard to find your character in actual fights and stuff like that. Now, the stun time on the Q-spec is decently long, and I do think that, you know, this could be quite annoying when it comes to the boss, but it is a big AoE. It'll hit them if they unblock and stuff like that. And then obviously it does have the E-spec, which is just, you know, it's a counter. It's like all the other ones. So I do think Chocho is the best, and honestly is very, very cool. I do like the powder effect when it comes to it. And you know, if you guys haven't got this Gen 3, definitely go and try and farm for it. None of the Gen 3s have been nerfed, you know, that much at all, and it's definitely worth getting, in my opinion. Anyways, guys, that's for this video. If you enjoyed this video, hit the subscribe, guys. Bye-bye.